I think through this journey for my wife and I, and both of us would agree on this, is that it's given us so much more. We listen much differently because our son communicates differently than we do. So we're better listeners than we would have been 30 years ago in our 30s. We have a much higher empathy.
Oh,
and I think to transform your organization, I think these are important. I really do.
No, for
but
sure.
we listen better. I think even our neighbors and our friends and people at our church, we listen so much differently today than we would have years ago. And I think we're continuing to improve there. We have so much more. We have empathy for their family situation, because if there's a family size of 4 or 5, there's some challenges in that family.
Yeah.
Either an illness or a mental illness or a physical illness with cancer or some type of disease. I mean, if you got a family 4 or 5, as you mentioned, you either in adversity, just came out of it, or we'll see adversity soon.
For sure.
One's going to. And I think for us, it has just given, if I'd say where we've changed and where we've transformed, is our listening skills and our amount of empathy we've had has really changed for us. And I give our adopted son credit for that. It has transformed us.
Yeah, that's wow.
And then as we talk to other organizational leaders, they see empathy and they see the listening skills, and they want that.
Yeah.
And in this process, when they try to change their cultures and transform their cultures, a big part of what's changing is them.
Hey, welcome to God's Glory and Men's Real Stories. I'm excited you're here. And if you're listening for the first time or you're back for another great episode, I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to start by letting you know that your stories and what you may be going through, they matter here. And you're not alone. So try not to worry about what chapter you're in, because if you trust God with your story, He's going to breathe life back into it. So sit back with the community that cares about you and hopes that you feel God's love as well as see God's glory in Men's Real Stories. So before we get started, do me a quick favor. Go ahead and click that thumbs up real quick down there below. You'll be glad you did. Then if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, it's free of charge. It won't cost you anything to click it now. I'll wait on you. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, thank you all for your support, and know that this podcast is nothing without you and the men who God has put it on their hearts to say yes to joining me. I appreciate all those who have shown interest by filling out our Google Doc form so that God can lead us to future guests. But today's special guest is a return guest and good friend of mine that I would even consider an evangelist or evangelist who evangelizes not on the corner or from a pulpit, but in the workplace by partnering with organizations across the world to transform their culture for good, for God, and for growth. He's been doing that by sharing his story to inspire leaders to be servant leaders who create other servant leaders in their organization by aligning their purpose to honor God. So I'm excited to welcome our brother, Mark Whitaker, to the episode. What's going on, brother? How you doing today?
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no,
it's great to be here.
Yeah. And this is, it's not often that I get to sit down with people again for a return, I guess you could say ongoing story, because as we were talking about before we got started, our stories are ongoing. They don't just stop where we complete our testimony and say, well, this happened in my life and God set me free from it. And it's since then it's been great, because as we both know that a lot of times in our stories, as God sets us free from one thing, it's just a memory for us to remember how He did that. So when we step into other situations, we remember how good and how much grace we had in that last situation. And so it's great to be able to sit back down with you and see what God is still doing in your life as you make waves and you continue to move around, the U.S. and other countries. So for the guests who have yet to listen to, I can't remember what episode number it was, but it's with Mark Whitaker. I guess I'll let you introduce yourself outside of what I've shared so far.
Yeah, I feel like I became a believer and a follower of Jesus 26 years ago, and in June of 1998, and it became life changing for me. But that didn't mean life became simple.
Yeah, no, for sure.
For me, you still got challenges, but boy, I learned that I learned that all those decisions that I was trying to make myself before I became a believer, and were a lot of impulse reactions, and were a lot of poor decisions during that time in my early 30s. Now in my mid 60s, I've gained some wisdom along this 30-year journey, and I work for Coca-Cola Consolidated, and I have the opportunity to talk to CEOs and senior leaders around the world, what we call T-Factor, where we train them and equip them where they can become a purpose-driven company, and how they can honor God in their business, and how they can integrate faith in their work. And what an honor it is to be a part of that.
Yeah, no, that and I truly think that it's not just in what you do, but it's in how people view you and see your life play out. Because I think for a person to say, okay, well, I've heard about this guy, Mark, but I don't really know him. And so a lot of times they're looking at your track record. They're looking at your story. They're looking at even your fruit as they kind of like say, okay, well, before we give this guy a run, do you think that he would be a good person to do what we're wanting to do that has maybe never been done? And so I think that's the beauty of what you do, because for a lot of people, you're wanting to come into their workplace and do something that they never thought was possible. But I think it starts with you living it out in your life, you living it out here at Co-Consolidated. What is that like when it comes to like knowing that everything that God does or every decision you make in your life is going to play a part in your story that others that you'll share or others will hear about as they continue to decide whether you're the guy to introduce a purpose-driven, faith-based, I guess, mission in their company?
I think it's twofold. There's so many Christians, and even Christian senior leaders, CEOs, and very senior leaders that so often we can fall in the trap to be Christians and go to church and to pray together and pray with our families. But so often we can turn that switch off on Monday morning. Morning, and some people, I see some refer to them as Monday morning atheists, that you're Christian, but turn the switch off Monday morning, Monday through Friday, and not really see God as part of our work.
Yeah.
But when you really look at Scripture, you look at Psalm 24:1, God owns it all. He owns our businesses, He owns our homes, He owns our families. He literally owns everything. And we're really stewards of these businesses.
Come on.
And I think when CEOs see that it's really God's company owners and CEOs, when they see it's God's company, kind of like Frank Harrison did well over 2 decades ago at Coca-Cola Consolidated, that he was a steward of this company as chairman and CEO. And we're just seeing CEOs from around the world. We've had 73 countries involved now in T-Factor in the last 6 years. And when they see that it's really God's company, and they can not turn that switch off on Monday morning, keep that switch on, and kind of like Colossians 3:23, whatever you do it with your whole heart, like you're working for the Lord and not for man.
Wow.
That means whatever you do. That means when you're at a grocery store, when you're at a post office, when you're at home, when you're at work. It means every minute of the day to do it in a God-honoring way, not just on weekends, but to never really turn that switch off. And it's amazing how many CEOs and senior leaders around the world are realizing that and putting that into practice.
Okay, so you just hit so much there, and I recognize that even the perspective, and I don't even consider it perspective because it's facts. I've learned that everything that revolves around us, our businesses, our homes, everything is provided by God. And so when you realize that, like, okay, you're in this position you're in now because God chose you to be in that position. But the question is what is He calling you to do in that position? It changes the perspective of how a person moves then, because it does become like, well, what is my purpose of being in this position? God didn't put me here just to make this about me. And I think that becomes that is a lot of people, they have this saying out there where it's like, I'm man-made. I created all of this. I worked hard. I busted my butt to get here. But in that, if you were man-made, then it's also going to take your strength to keep it going. And so when people fall into situations where, like, okay, the company's going under, numbers aren't what they supposed to look like, they believe that if I got myself here, that I got to keep myself afloat. Yeah. And so what you just hit on was something that I feel like is why it is so hard to want to, or even see the value in introducing or bringing God back into your company, giving him the glory for where you're at and where the success of your company, because I don't think that it's just a coincidence that Coke Consolidated has done as well as it has under the leadership that we have over the years that I've been here. And I think that speaks to the purpose of this company. I think it speaks to the leadership of this company, regardless of how you may look at them from a personal standpoint. Putting God in the front seat, in the driver's seat of this company, I think speaks, to the constant growth, to the constant, churning of what we're doing here, because we're constantly seeking him for direction from the top down.
Yeah, think about a publicly traded company with a purpose statement to honor God in all we do, by serving others, pursuing excellence, and growing profitably. Where do you see a company that's publicly traded on the NASDAQ that has a purpose statement to honor God in all we do? I mean, that's remarkable. I think God, in turn, has blessed the business as a result of that.
Yeah. So in all of that, because you play a huge role in not only constantly, moving around with our CEO, with Frank Harrison and other leaders here in this business, but what is it like in your own life? Because, we were talking about how a lot of times we look at executives and upper leaderships, we say that they have everything and that their life looks so grand, and it looks like everything they could have ever wanted they've achieved in the spaces they've made it to. What is it like, though, behind, I guess you could say, a lot of people like to say, behind the curtain of your life when it comes to, like, I'm doing this, I'm traveling here, I'm going here, I'm speaking to these people, and it's all for God's glory, for the purpose of putting him back in his rightful space. But how does that look in balancing not only, all the places you go to continue to uplift him, but also how that looks as you being the leader of your home as well?
Well, I'll say this, and a good example, just literally a week ago, we had a T-Factor event. We're doing 4 in-person and 4 virtual this week. T stands for transformation, where we help equip CEOs and senior leaders how to integrate faith in their work and to be a purpose-driven, faith-friendly company. And just a week ago, we had over 1,000 attendees from 53 different countries. Wow. We did a virtual event. We did it simultaneously in Korean, Spanish, and English, the event. So when one clicked in to log into the meeting, they could choose the language that they chose. Nice. 53 countries, over 1,000 attendees, and it was amazing. But when I go home, it's real life. I've got a 91-year-old mom that we help care for and spend a lot of time with. And we're blessed to have her at 91, but she has challenges in her life with her health and dementia, and we have a special needs son. So I go home to real life. So so I know a lot of people see kind of the exciting part, and Mark flew to South Korea and presented to a couple thousand business leaders a few months ago, and shared about T-Factor and how you can become a purpose-driven company. But behind the scenes, there is real life. It doesn't mean life is simple.
Right.
I mean, I've got a marriage and been married 45 years, and I want to honor my wife, and I value her, and an aging mom and a special needs son. So just because I became a Christian 26 years ago, a lot of people say, okay, he became a Christian. Life's simple now. No, it's not. There's real life happening. Now I handle it differently. And I try to have God lead my steps instead of impulse reactions, and pray about my decisions and reflect on them where they're God honoring decisions. So I do things differently. But it doesn't mean it's simple.
No, and that makes sense, because I recognize, even myself, you talk about the impulse reactions to things sometimes. I recognize how sometimes when you've been living a certain way for so long, your impulse reaction sometimes is to go back to the old way of how you would handle things. And normally at a knee-jerk reaction of like something as simple as like things, things that are unexpected in my household happening, I find myself immediately going back to like, okay, well, what is it going to take for me to get this done? What is it going to take for me to make this happen? How late am I going to have to stay up? I immediately go to like, Rob, how much strength do you have to put this together, pull this through the finish line, and make everybody happy? And because I've been doing that for 20 plus years, I mean, you're talking about like, 20 plus years. I think because that is just a go-to move, I find myself being like almost checked in the moment of like, but why do it in just your strength? Why haven't you even sought God in this? Why haven't you even turned it over to him? Why haven't you trusted him with it? Isn't he trustworthy? Hasn't he shown you that he's trustworthy? And so in those situations in your life, do you find yourself I guess like trying to teeter that line of like what Mark can do and what God has done and can continue to do in your life?
Well, I'm getting better at it, but we're always, I believe, a work in process.
For sure.
But I'm better than I was 30 years ago. And I would say where I was this, that I can fix it. And I can fix anything. Now I'm talking about my life in my 30s before I became a Christian and became a believer, is that I thought I could fix it. A good example is a special needs son who has learning disabilities. We adopted him at 5. I can remember telling my wife, said, well, we'll try to get him where he can go to college. You know, again, this is when we adopted him at 5. Now he's 45. So this has been 40 years since we adopted him. And then I said, okay, then I came to reality, okay, he's not going to be able to go to college, but maybe he can learn HVAC or become a plumber or learn electrical work. And then, no, he's not. I tell you where I think I become better at and wiser in my mid-60s than I was during my 30s and early 40s is this, that embracing this situation. Our son is who he is. He's not going to be able to go to HVAC or be an electrician or a plumber. He's not going to have those capabilities. He can't tell time on a watch. But I tell you, he's got a heart of gold, and we've just embraced who he is. And I tell you what, he lost in intellect, he gained in heart. He would do anything for anybody. And we've learned that. I think where we've got better at is not trying, where I've become better by God leading, is embrace things the way they are and not try to fix everything. Because some things are not fixable.
Yeah.
My mom's 91. She's got dementia.
Yeah.
She's not going to be the person she was at 65.
For sure.
She's not going to be the person she was at 85. But we've learned to embrace my mom where she's at in this season of her life, and we still learn from her and grow from her. And I think that's where I've probably become, where God's given me some wisdom along this journey, is to embrace things where they are and not try to fix everything that's not fixable.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how many blessings can come out of having a son with learning disabilities and special needs, having a 91-year-old mother. But when I was trying to fix everything, it became almost frustrating because I'm thinking, why can't we get this done? Why can't we get this done? It becomes exhausting.
Yeah, yeah.
And now it's not exhausting anymore.
No,
because we just love where God, hey, we're blessed to have my mom here at 91.
Yeah.
Think how many people would love to have their mom there that may have passed in their 60s or 70s or even in their 50s.
Yeah.
I mean, just embrace the situation that God's given us. Look at the blessings in that. And that, I think that's come over this 6 decades journey.
Yeah. And I think, wow. Okay. So I love how you took something and reframed it by allowing God to show you the blessings in what you have instead of what you don't have, and you're believing that God can change or you can change in your own efforts. Because I think for a lot of us, we struggle with the idea of feeling like God is absent because things don't look the way our expectations want them to look. And so, as you just said, it's in recognizing that there's a blessing even in things that don't look the way we want them to look, because the blessing is that maybe God's trying to show you down or slow you down to see what he's doing, even in these little moments where you're like, but God, I mean, why can't it just be this way? And you know, I'm guilty of that, of like, man, my expectation was that like it would look like this after a couple years. But I think that there is so much to pull from or glean from when you realize that God has, he has a story that he's writing that won't look like our stories, as we've learned, because his desires for us, his plans for us are far greater than what we could imagine. But a lot of times we're not privileged to see what he's doing in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I think what you just shared was like truly a testament to like a lot of people who, in a way, they believe that, well, if you're walking with God, then shouldn't God like change it to make it look better? Isn't walking with God or having God on your side, doesn't that just make your picture look perfect, and that you shouldn't have sicknesses or different things that you struggle with? And I think you spoke to this at the beginning of the episode of just walking with God doesn't change the fact that we're going to experience storms, because we're all either, you know, walking out of a storm, stepping into a storm, or currently in one in our lives. But it's knowing who we're walking with in those storms, who we're with in those storms, that can do things that far outseed what we can do in our own strength of fixing it, which is something, you know, as men, we constantly find ourselves being looked at to do. Fix it, fix it, you know, like when are you going to fix this? When is this going to get fixed? And don't get me wrong, there are some things that we are in charge of fixing. The household equipment, you know, my getting, you know, it's something that's been on my list for a while. You need to get the toilet fixed. You need to get this fixed. And so that is I wish I could sometimes just turn that over to God and be like, well, God, can you fix this toilet? Like, help me out here. But he's giving me the resources to do it. He's giving me the finances to do it. So it's all about how we reframe it and look at it. Yeah. When we realize that, man, he's provided me everything I need already for this. And so do you feel like, in looking back over your life when it comes to like where you're at now, do you feel like God had already provided you a lot of what you needed for this season, even when you didn't recognize it beforehand?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I think about just a good example again, since we're talking about our special needs son with severe learning disabilities. When I thought I could fix him, it was my expectations. It was, okay, we adopted him, we're a good family, he'll learn a trade in time as he gets older and be able to make a good living. And I look now, which really all that was impossible. That was just our expectations.
Right.
And then it became, like I said, it became exhausting, it became frustrating. But now I think about, look how many that have lost a child and would love to have their child, lost a child due to cancer, an illness, or a car accident.
Yeah.
I mean, look how many people, how many friends of ours have lost children.
Yeah.
And to have our son and to embrace him and the loving heart that he has, there's nothing to fix. It's just a matter of embracing the situation that you're in and seeing the blessings in that. Mm-hmm. And I tell you something, Robert, is I think my wife and I think adopting our son wasn't for us to fix him. I think we learned from him.
Wow.
He didn't learn from us. I look at his siblings, and I look at Ginger and I, my wife and I, how much we learned from his heart of generosity. Wow. And how much he gives, how he would give the shirt off his back. I think God gave us him for us to learn from him.
Wow, yeah. No, talk about reframing. Yeah, I didn't even consider it that way, but yeah, no, that is a beautiful way of how God continues to work through other people, using them as a vessel to show us certain things that we may not see outside of our house, outside of our lens of what we're looking at, because maybe we would never paid attention to it if it were just somebody that was at work or that was at our church, in our church community. But sometimes when it's the person that's sitting right in front of you that shows you what God's love truly looks like, you can't overlook that, and it's not even something always as grand as like, well, they could do this, or they could afford to go out and purchase all this. For sometimes it's the simple things of just like, I love you, and I'm wanting to show you a childlike love, a love that God wants all of us to have. But a lot of times we step away from when we grow older because of the experiences we've gone through that say, well, the childlike love I had previously, it got me hurt. Or the childlike love that I showed in the past, it made my heart ache because of how people handled me. And so we get away from that, believing that I can't still be the same person I was and love people the same way, when in actuality it is I won't say it's simple, but it is just that like the way God loved us, despite all that we've done, he never said, hey, you broke my heart, I'm gonna need time to repair my heart in order to love you again. Or you know what, you just turn your back on me. You never even look back to see if it hurt, or if it mattered that you were turning away from me. He said, I love you anyway, and I forgive you. And it's crazy how sometimes we don't see that in the world enough, but we see it from the people that we don't even pay attention to. As you said, through your son, showing you that, like, wow, I want to love others the way he loves others, because he's probably experiencing a love from God that we don't even really get to sit in, because maybe we haven't really stopped to say, God, how do you want me to love those around me? How do you want me to show up and forgive them and love on them despite how they made me feel or what they did to me? And so I love that you brought that up, because I think about that even in my life of, am I loving others the way God loves me? I think that's a question I constantly ask, like, God, can you show me opportunities to love others the way you love me? Because there are days and there are times where I'm just like, I don't feel like doing this today. I don't know if you ever feel that in your constant, pursuit of, like, knowing Absolutely. That I have to go to this business now and love on them and show them, point them to God, point them to understanding that it's in introducing him back into your company, or doing it for the first time if he was never there. That is where you begin to not just say, okay, well, God is here now, but it's what he's going to do to transform not just your business, but you.
Yeah.
And what is that like of, knowing that, hey, look, it's not going to be overnight transformation? Like, how do those questions go when people ask you about, like, what does that transformation look like, not only in the company, but as far as the employees go?
And it does change ourselves too. And I love that you brought that up. And because this is a couple-year process to be, and you really never get there either. You're constantly transforming and a work in process, no matter as the organization or as a person or a leader. But I think through this journey for my wife and I, and both of us would agree on this, is that it's given us so much more. We listen much differently because our son communicates differently than we do. So we're better listeners than we would have been 30 years ago in our 30s. We have a much higher empathy.
Oh,
and I think to transform your organization, I think these are important. I really do.
No,
but we listen better. I think even our neighbors and our friends and people at our church, we listen so much differently today than we would have years ago, and I think we're continuing to improve there. We have so much more. We have empathy for their family situation, because if there's a family size of 4 or 5, there's some challenges in that family.
Yeah,
either an illness or a mental illness or a physical illness with cancer or some type of disease. I mean, if you got a family 4 or 5, as you mentioned, you either in adversity, just came out of it, or we'll see adversity soon.
For sure.
One's going to. And I think for us, it has just given, if I'd say where we've changed and where we've transformed, is our listening skills and our amount of empathy we've had has really changed for us. And I give our adopted son credit for that. It has transformed us.
Yeah, that's wow.
And then as we talk to other organizational leaders, they see empathy and they see the listening skills, and they want that.
Yeah.
And in this process, when they try to change their cultures and transform their cultures, a big part of what's changing is them.
Yes. I was going to say that. I was like, the transformation starts from the top down. And so when people start to experience what they're expecting from that person, then sometimes it starts to make a person question, like, okay, well, like, what's going on? But what's going on is that they're experiencing that love from that person, and it's starting to do something in their heart. Yeah. It's starting to change the way they want to show up now. And I think that's why you see so much success when a leader steps into a place of saying, I'm going to be a servant leader where I'm going to serve you, not just serve you with a check, but I'm going to serve you with my heart. I'm going to serve you from love. I'm going to serve you from a place of like, we care how you're doing. We care about your mental health. Yeah. We care about your spiritual health. We care about these things. And even if that doesn't resonate with you or that's not where you're at, know that we want to put things in place to pour into that stuff, to make sure you're good. And even thinking about that, I know we've had this discussion before when me and you have spoken about, like, in everything you're doing, from the work side to the home side, I think every time we have a call, me and you we have a call or we pray together, I always ask you, like, how are you doing, like, mentally? Mm-hmm. How are you handling just the ongoing? Because we always talk about how, like, man, it's busy, constant running. I was here, there, and, honestly, all the hotels start to look the same, and I'm just constantly moving. But what have you done as you consistently pour into others to make sure you're full and make sure that you're in a good place mentally, spiritually, emotionally, in all those areas, to constantly move as much as you do and pour into others and show up the way God wants you to show up?
Well, it's not a one simple step for me.
Okay.
And a couple different things. One is quiet time's important to me. Quiet time in the morning, quiet time to pray, quiet time to read scripture, quiet time to grow in my faith, because we're a work in process. None of us can say, well, I don't even think Billy Graham would say, I think Billy Graham was so humble, he would say he was still learning and growing
for sure
at 99 years old when he passed. I mean, we really are. We're on a path to continue to learn and grow. So that quiet time is important to me, that prayer time to say, God, I want to turn this over to you. God, I pray that keep me out of my own way. I want you to lead. God, please give me wisdom and discernment where I reflect on decisions and not make impulse decisions. That quiet time is important. And another important to me is like prayer groups, like the prayer where we pray for each other. These iron sharpen iron opportunities, those are important to me, and I have several of those kind of relationships. There's iron sharpen iron. And then I also have a group, and we're 9 years meeting now. It's a group of 11 of us, and we meet every other Saturday. And we've met for 9 years now.
Nice.
Every other Saturday. And we know each other so well, and we've been so vulnerable with one another that we hold each other accountable, and we learn from each other and grow from one another. We pray for one another. But that kind of accountability, either in prayer groups like with you, that you and I have, or this group where we meet every other Saturday now for in person for 9 years, is important to me, because I do have a place I can go and share, hey, this has been a tough week.
Yeah.
And here's the reason. I mean, I've seen my mom go through some tremendous health changes, for example, and where you can really share with one another and pray for each other and kind of hold each other up, not just hold each other accountable, but hold each other up. That's important.
Yeah.
And I know when I was in my 30s, I was like, what do you mean? I don't need anybody to help hold me up. I can do this alone.
Sure.
And how'd that turn out? Yeah. That was that was a train wreck.
It was.
I think transparency, honesty, vulnerability that comes from listening and having empathy. I think those are so important. And I've surrounded myself with people that are vulnerable, transparent, and open and honest, where we can really share what's going on in our life. And I think that's how you grow and learn.
Yeah, no. And you know what? I love that you said that, because, see, a lot of people like to say, well, I want to know what it took for him to get to where he's going. And I love the steps you just poured out, because I have learned that it is in all those things that you just shared. It's the quiet time. It's having those support groups, those support men, and in our, I think in our cases, it's normally a group of men that we surround ourselves in, not only just to continue to lift us up in prayer, but to also have the time to say, hey, look, I'm also going to be the ears of Jesus. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to have answers for you, but I'm going to give you the space to be able to just kind of like get out what's going on in your life. What have you been seeing? Not just so I can give you answers, but so we can be specific about what we're praying for, so that we can know exactly what's going on and not just keep it hidden. Well, there's some things that are happening. And it's like sometimes those things, when they don't get addressed or when they don't even get pulled into the light, they become almost like mold, where it's like, wow, okay, that mold had taken over that whole thing, and now it's corrupting the way I move, the way I show up, not just at home, but also when I show up to work. People aren't getting the same person that they used to get, or they're getting the person that they've always gotten because I've never addressed these things. And so in everything you just shared, I love those pieces, because I realize that without those pieces that we turn to, that we incorporate into our lives to continue to be who God called us to be, it's where our success truly comes from. Because, not to sound like a prosperity pastor or anything like that, but success doesn't always look like the riches and all the glitz and the glamour, but it's how he's using us to reach people, how he's using us to be just that, a follower of him, but a disciple that disciples others through our interactions, through our encounters, through how they watch and they witness. Like, man, there's something about that guy. Like, every time he shows up, it's like he's never had a bad day. But that can't be possible. So how is it that he shows up in a way to where it's just like light is coming from him, love is coming from him? And it's in all these things that we do behind the scenes when we're pouring, we're allowing ourselves to be refilled, that we can pour so much. So I appreciate you sharing that, because and I appreciate not also being a part of a group where I can sit down and I can share things with you. And even that time when we had lunch, and my son was able to glean from just some of the things that you've done and some of the things that he had questions about. Because I know the beauty of it is as I continue to surround him with people, he's starting to realize, like, man, all of these guys are like doing very well for themselves, but they're saying the same thing. They have the same, tools in their life that they go to be filled, or they go to make sure they're able to show up all the time. And so I think that's super important. So I appreciate you for like constantly being a person in my life to speak not only life over, but also to pray with me in times, because I know how important that is to find your, as I used to call it back in the days, I used to call it a wingman. I think it's important to have a wingman. Yeah. It's important to have even a circle of men that can surround you. Do you feel like for a lot of people who are still, I know as we get older, it gets really hard to like have friends or still find friends as friends drop off, because we've become family, man. We've had to like say, hey, look, unfortunately I can't come out, or I can't go there, can't do this. Do you find, well, here's a better question. Where do men find these support groups, these men that they can do life with, that they can walk through life with, that they can share things with when they've never felt safe to share themselves?
And I would say this. I mean, I pray specifically. That's part of my morning quiet time prayer. God put people in my path that I can learn from and grow from. And he may not an hour later put that person there, but he does every time. It'll be God's timing, not my timing. But God puts people in my path, like us praying for each other. God puts people in my path that I can learn from, grow from. But if you pray specifically, that God, you will meet them. You meet them at work, you'll meet them at church, you'll meet them at a restaurant, you'll meet them in an Uber car, but you will meet them. God will put facts. God will put men in your path, and for women in their path, that we can learn from and grow from and be mentored by. And I feel strongly, and I share this with a lot of young people, is show me your mentors I'll show you your future.
Yeah.
And I know
yeah.
if I look over my life and my journey, my peaks and my valleys, it all depends who was my mentors
Yeah.
at that time. I really feel strongly at that. Show me your mentor.
Yeah.
And I show you your future. And I would define success today so much different in my 30s. I know if your listeners listen to my previous episode, I talked about it. 32. I was divisional president of a $70 billion company for 8 years. And I bought the CEO's home with an 8-car garage, and I had a Falcon 50 for 8 years as a corporate jet. And I had that 8-car garage filled with 8 cars. Well, 30 years later, those cars are rust.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
Those are rubbish. And I tell you, to me, success, and I remember your son asking that question too here a couple weeks ago when we had lunch. Success to me is a life of significance. It's not your title or what job you have or what kind of home you live in or how much money you make. None of that makes any difference at all, because we're all gonna pass away at some point.
Yeah.
And what makes a difference is living a life of significance, making the world a better place when you leave it than when you came in.
Yeah.
And really serving God and being an ambassador for Jesus. And God wants us to impact others. And I think that comes with what we talked about earlier, with listening and having empathy.
Yeah.
When you listen to others and really listen into their challenges, and you have empathy for them, that you can relate to the situation that they're describing, that I feel strongly that will lead to a life of significance, and that to me is success.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And you know, that's something that's been a constant conversation with me and my wife. Is we're both, you know, it's funny how people say, well, you know, discipleship happens outside of you. And me and my wife have been talking about like what discipleship actually looks like, and who's your discipler and who's discipling me at the time. But that was one of the things of like, what does success look like in discipleship? What does success look like, and what is our purpose? Because people are always asking, well, what is your purpose? And the difference in purpose and assignment, and that like your assignment right now is going throughout the country with T Factor, but your purpose is still the same. Your purpose is to bring God into every space you go. Your purpose is to make disciples out of every CEO you shake hands with, because in making disciples out of them, you're now creating almost a space for now more disciples to come up underneath them as they continue to allow God to lead them. And so when a lot of people are looking, saying, okay, well, as a Christian, what is my purpose now? Is it still my passion? Is it still... I've learned that a lot of times we make it so hard in trying to understand what is the purpose of a Christian. Like, has my purpose changed? And should I change my job? And I truly believe that where God has put us, even if we weren't following him, he has purpose in saying that's the assignment. The purpose is reaching all those around you. Yeah. You could be a nurse. The purpose is reaching all those around you. You could be a trash man. The purpose is still reaching all those around you.
You could teach guitar lessons. Well, God's going to put people in your path that you can impact.
Yeah, yes. And so I think in knowing that, I think it makes it a lot easier, instead of like saying, well, God, I'm just sitting back waiting for you to give me purpose. Show me what my purpose is. I think that's the beauty of saying, okay, it's less of me, less of what I thought my life would look like, less of what I had planned, and more of what God has planned for me and where he takes me and what the purpose still is, no matter what I'm doing. I'm a multi-million-dollar CEO, and the purpose is still the same. Oh, yeah. How am I going to use my resources, my time, and use whatever God has given me previously in previous seasons or now to be able to reach more people for God? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Frank has gotten so good at, in saying, okay, in spite of all the resources I have, how could I reach more people with the resources that I have gotten now? And so
we can learn from him.
For sure. Even down to the book that he wrote, the Transformation Factor, of knowing that book has a lot of the gems to like saying, okay, well, like, you've done all of this. Why continue to like push this agenda? Does it matter? But I think that it's in knowing what your purpose is that now resets you to say, of course it matters. Because as long as I have breath in my lungs, God is calling me into different spaces to continue to preach the gospel, to continue to allow people, even if they don't want to hear my preaching, they're going to experience me through my actions. And what are my actions saying about who he is? I think that's a big thing of like, okay, there's some people that will never listen to you, but they are paying close attention to everything you do, which is why every action encounter I've had with you, the encounters my sons had with you, it's moments of where it's almost like, feel this guy out. Like, let me see what this guy's really about. Like, let me see if this guy's really practicing what he preaches. It's one thing to hear it, but it's another thing to see a person in action and say, oh, wow, he believes that. Like he's living that. And so I think that's the beauty of like being able to sit down with people who you're wanting to glean from to say, I want to be more of a reflection of Christ, but I recognize also that it's also in the community that I have around me that allows me to continue to say, that probably wasn't Christ-like, was it? And you could say, yeah, well, I mean, I know that he's not expecting you to be perfect.
Yeah.
He's still transforming you.
Yeah.
But it's also in those moments where you can stop and say, that wasn't Christ-like, was it? Yeah. Because you're recognizing that he's still working on your heart.
Yeah.
He's still, and that's going to be a constant thing, as you said.
Yeah.
So,
and striving, right? We're striving. And I look at Frank Harrison as such a great example of that, and I really feel strongly of this, and I try to live this out, and I do fail. I mean, like you said, each day we're striving, but we do fail, and I think, oh God, why did I do that? Please forgive me. Thank for his mercy and his grace and mercy. But I do feel the purpose of our life, and that's come with on this journey, the last 3 decades of being a Christian, is really Matthew 28:19 and 2 Timothy 2:2. I really believe that when I read Frank's book, that's what I see is Matthew 28:19 and 2 Timothy 2:2, which is this: go make disciples of all nations. That's plant seeds through our actions. Often it's not going to cross the hall and say, let me pull out the book of John and let me go through book of John 3:16 with you. It's through our actions. They see we're different. We're listening different amount of empathy. They see we really care. The face of Jesus.
Yeah.
And joyful, even in adverse circumstances.
Yeah.
And people see that, and they start asking questions. I think that's the Matthew 28:19, planting seeds to ones who do not know them, who do not know God yet.
Right.
That's the evangelism, just like Jesus did.
Yeah.
And then I think the 2 Timothy 2:2 is where Paul poured into Timothy, just like Jesus poured into those 12 disciples.
Right.
Paul poured into Timothy, which is 2 Timothy 2:2. And then he's telling Timothy, take these things you learned from me, who was younger in his faith than Paul.
Right.
So Paul's pouring into him, and he's telling Timothy, you go become a Paul and have your own Timothy.
Right.
And mentor other mentees.
Right.
And help. That's helping believers grow in their faith. That's the discipleship arm. But each day when I'm T-Factor and meeting with senior leaders and CEOs that want to become a purpose-driven company, I really believe that is discipleship.
Yeah.
I believe that is 2 Timothy 2:2.
Yeah.
When I see Frank's book, what a great example of 2 Timothy 2:2 that we can all learn from. Senior leaders and other CEOs can learn from. That Frank sees it's not his company; he's a steward of God. It's God's company.
Yeah.
But how you can use it for God's glory.
Yeah.
And to use it a way to glorify God like Frank does. But I really think that evangelism and discipleship, Matthew 28:19, 2 Timothy 2:2, and that's evangelism and discipleship.
Yeah. Well,
I think that's a purpose of our life.
That's why
I really
called
believe
you.
that.
Yeah, that's why I called you evangelist, because I think that a lot of people think that it only looks one way, but you are truly out here evangelizing in a space where a lot of people wouldn't even consider it, because a lot of people think that, well, God doesn't have a place in the workplace. God doesn't have a place in the schools. God doesn't have a place anywhere in there anymore. They took him out of it. They probably won't put him back. But it's even in the encounters that you guys are even having with schools now, where you can say, hey, look, just because of what they took him out of in one time doesn't mean that God isn't making his way back into those places, because he sees the darkness that's come over those places, and he realizes that that he needs to be heard, he needs to be seen, he needs to be experienced, even in those places there that they took God out of. At one time, at one season, it's time for him to go back into those places and allow people who have not felt seen, who have not felt loved, who have not felt like they mattered, to experience all that through someone like you, like me, like others who truly walk with God, allow them to be a vessel to be able to pour into others. So I think that's why all of this is so important. And I really appreciate you even taking the time out today to really be able to sit with me and just really share a piece of your heart, share a piece of your story that a lot of people may not know about, outside of what they've heard in the movie they've seen and all these different things. But just get to like the root of like how God continues to work in your life, how he continues to work through you, and what he's constantly doing through your family, you know, not only you, but also your wife and her testimony and how she shares with different people, so that they can see that like, wow, this wasn't just a one-sided transformation. This is a dual-sided transformation in just your story and what God did in your wife's story. And so, and I truly believe that in all of that, it's an encouragement for me to look at your story, to see how your life transpired, how your wife, you know, I love how, and I tried to quote it exactly, but how her love for God was greater than her love for you. But because of that love for God that she had, it's where he kept her, how he continued to bless her to realize that he didn't leave just because you weren't in the picture anymore at one time in your life. And so it encourages me, and it should encourage a lot of people who are like, wow, like what if I end up having to step away from my family? What if I'm in prison? What if I have to move away to work? You know, will God still be here with my family even if I'm gone? And it's in knowing that, like, no, God is a provider. He's a father. He provides for all of us despite what's going on or what's changed in our life. So that's, you know, that right there is just super encouraging. It's so great to see that in real life, and not just in like maybe a movie, or not just like a story that doesn't truly connect with me, to see how he continues to work in our lives, no matter what age we are, no matter where we are in our lives, is just truly encouraging. So before we get out of here today, is there anything that God has put on your heart lately that you feel like maybe this might be the time to like just really like bless others with something, a nugget or whatever that God has been really speaking to you, whether it be in your morning time with him in the word, or maybe you may be flying and God just like, I hear you, God. And maybe that wasn't just for me. Maybe that was for somebody else who may be listening today.
Well, God's put on my heart here more recently is really, no matter what situation, let's say you're mad at your spouse, or you're mad at an in-law, or mad, but embrace what you have. You're blessed to have a spouse. You're blessed to have an in-law. You're blessed to have your parent. I know a lot of people my age, they've lost both of their parents. Most people my age have lost both of their parents by this point in their life. And I'm blessed to have a 91-year-old mom, even with the challenges that she has. But to me, God has put on my heart is to really embrace the situation you have. Like I see some that neighbor a few houses down from us that had an air conditioning problem, and it's almost like he totally lost it. And I'm thinking, you're blessed to have a house. You're blessed to have a home. An air conditioning challenge, it's fixable, easily fixable. And you know, in a few days' time, it'll be back to normal. But don't look at what you have or what you don't have. Embrace what you do have, and say, God, thank you for what you've given me.
Yeah.
And what a blessing it is to have it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people who don't have family at all.
For sure. And you know, I don't even think you're saying like, hey, don't look, you're reframe, and it's something I constantly do of like, I reframe it. I look at the blessing instead of looking at the inconvenience of it, looking at this is not how I saw it going. I'm looking at the blessing of like, you know what, God, I can still see the blessing in it. I'm not, some people call it spiritual bypassing of like, well, God will fix it or God will do it, but no, recognizing that what he's already done, is good.
Oh,
What he's
yeah.
already done and what he's given me the resources to do is already good. And I don't know what he has in store for me tomorrow, but I know that what he's already given me, what he's already blessed me with, is more than enough. It's more than I maybe had in the last season. And he's not done yet, because as I'm always encouraging people with, and I encourage myself with it, is that God is here for your good and for his glory. And God likes his glory. And so know that it may not be good according to your expectations, but what he's going to do in it is going to be for your good, for your family's good, for your children's good, and for many generations after that. So I appreciate you sharing that today, because that is such a great message, a great, just, I guess, thing to ponder, something to sit with, even after this episode is over with, of like, wow, God, what have you blessed me with that I have been too busy looking at all the other things that are in the way, looking at all the inconveniences of it, looking at how it doesn't look like what I had planned or what I was hoping for. And so, no, I think that's really good.
Mm-hmm. I think if one really listens to other people around them, be it at work or be it in your neighborhood or no matter what environment you're in, if you listen to others around you and really have empathy, you'll see how blessed you truly are.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's good. Come on. That's good. Yeah, you're right. That's good. Well, Mark, I appreciate you sitting down with me today, taking the time out to allow me for us to connect here at Coke, just to be able to consistently show up the way you do and share your story and allow it to bless others, to as I like to say it, we're throwing seed, praying that it falls on good ground with those who are listening, maybe those who are going through a hard time right now, those who are having a hard time seeing God in the picture of what they're going through. Maybe they haven't even considered inviting God into their story, and maybe today might be a great day for them to do that. Maybe today might be a great day for them to say, hey, look, God, I want to surrender my story, the brokenness, the hurt, the pain, all that's going on around me, to see what you can do in a life that maybe I feel like is over. It feel like it's just beating me up. It feels hopeless. It feels like it's doing more damage to me than good. To say, God, I want to see how you can use me and reframe and allow me to have a lens to see things differently than how I saw them before. And I think that's where the blessings are found. So I appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate you sitting down with me as always. I appreciate your friendship and your mentorship, of just as I continue to do life, knowing that like I can't do this on my own. I've learned that I'm a man who says that I know I can't do life on my own. No man is supposed to be an island. So in this life, I appreciate all the other men who are in my life to continue to pour into me, to continue to mentor me, and to continue just to have these moments where even we pray together when we recognize that like, hey, look, I need prayer right now. I'm not doing well. So I appreciate your friendship, and I appreciate you sharing with our audience today, of all those who've come to listen and really just see what God is constantly doing in our lives to give him the glory for it all.
Well, thank you, Robert. Thank you for having me. And I've learned in this journey, if you want change, I really believe it starts by looking in the mirror.
Yeah, that's good.
That's where it starts.
Yeah, no. So right. I agree with that. Well, hey, I want to thank everybody for joining us today for another great episode. I want to leave you all with a great reminder from a friend of both of ours, my brother, the late great Chad Height III of the Rabbit Hole Show. We all have a story. We all have struggles, but the good news is that you're not alone. So you guys be blessed. We'll catch you on the next episode.
And that wraps up another episode of God's Glory and Men's Real Stories. I'm Justin Moore, and we want to give a huge thank you to all of you for tuning in and being part of our community. Your support means the world to us, and we hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as we did. If what you heard resonated with you, please consider subscribing or leaving a review on today's video. It really helps us reach more listeners like you. Don't forget to connect with us on social media at God's Glory and Men's Real Stories for updates, new episode clips, and to share your thoughts on today's episode. We love hearing from you. If this conversation happened to shed a light on past experiences of yours that may have been happy moments or maybe hurtful moments, Feel free to keep the conversation going in the comments below, so as a community we can listen, pray with you, or point you to helpful resources. Join us next time for another great episode, and until then, let's give God the glory for all he's doing in our stories.